Welcome to the Homegrown Podcast, the place where we share the truth about food and farming from our kitchen to yours. I'm your host, Liz Hazelmeyer, along with my husband, Joey.
Good afternoon.
And together we hope to inspire, educate, and equip you in your pursuit of true nourishment. Today we are sitting down with Dianne Koehler. Dianne is the owner and director of the Nutrition Therapy Institute, or the NTI, in Arvada, Colorado. The NTI provides comprehensive training in holistic nutrition for those wanting to make a difference in the world by sharing what they know about nutrition, wellness, and natural food cooking. All of those things are exactly what we're about at Homegrown, so we are really excited to have you on the show, Dianne. Thank you for joining us.
Yeah, thank you. I'm excited too.
Okay, so before we hit record, we were just chatting about all kinds of things. And what was the phrase you just summed up so beautifully? I was like, I wish we were recording when you said that.
I always wish we were recording.
So, I think one of the topics for today's conversation is going to be why we are all so confused about what we eat. And one of those tension points that we feel is that we've got information coming from different places. So what'd you say? You can either be...
Yeah, there's something like you're either striving for, how did I word that? Being healthy or making money was kind of the way that we talked about it.
Yeah, those are kind of like your tool pools of influence, right? You're either really looking to get back to traditional ways of eating and what's actually nourishing to your body. And so then there's that kind of paradigm and lens through which we see food, which is like the ancestral food movement. There's a lot of good and diversity there. But then there's also like mainstream media. We were talking before we hit record about the Tufts analysis of foods, right? And then we see a Harvard study come out against saturated fat, or we see something else come out. And we're like, why are we all scratching our heads? Why is this still a conversation? The most fundamental human experience is eating food. Why can we not figure it out? And part of the pull is because we've got this industry influence, at least in the States. So, Dianne, I'm excited to jump into some of this today.
Yeah, and I think kind of to kick us off, we were discussing there's importance around seeking out nutritional education. And curious what your thoughts are on why people should be seeking out nutritional education.
Yeah, well, so first of all, something that always kind of sticks in my mind is, I've heard people talk about how humans are the only animals, and, you have to think about wild animals in this case, are the only animals who now need someone to tell them what to eat. Yeah. We just simply cannot figure it out on our own, supposedly, because I don't know why people think we can't figure it out on our own. But where this comes from for me is I was very confused when I became a mother, actually, is what happened 24 years ago now. My health at that point in time was not great. My son's health, very quickly after he was born, we were confronted with the fact that he had some health conditions. And, I did everything my doctor told me to do, and all the medications and the drugs and the creams. He had severe eczema. He had asthma. Severe asthma was, emergency room visits, multiple emergency room visits before he was probably 12 or 16 months old. And so I had all of this. And then what really hit me is when he was 4 years old, we went to his first dentist appointment, and he had never had, we didn't eat, like, I knew enough. We didn't eat a lot of sugar, no candy. I thought I was doing all the right things. On his very first dentist appointment when he was 4 years old, he had 10 cavities.
Wow.
And I nursed him, so there was no baby bottle feeding, no juices, none of that kind of stuff. And he had 10 cavities, 2 of which were so bad that he had to have what's called baby root canals. And he had these silver caps on his teeth from the age of 4 until those teeth fell out, those baby teeth fell out when he was, 12 or 13 years old. So every single one of his school pictures for, 8 to 10 years, he's smiling and you can see these silver caps. And it's always a reminder to me of mistakes that I made. And at the time, when he was 4 years old, and he, found out he has these 10 cavities, I was quite honestly devastated because I had been doing what I thought was right, and I had been following what I thought was the right diet, and it was reinforced by mainstream media and all of these other influences that I was getting. And quite honestly, that type of diet is still heavily reinforced. And so I was devastated. I'm like, how could he have these cavities? And they just kept telling me, oh, it's genetics, it's genetics. And I just happened around the same time, like within maybe a week or two after that, I just happened to stumble upon Sally Fallon's book, Nourishing Traditions. And I bought it because the cover is just absolutely beautiful. The artwork on all of her books is absolutely beautiful. And really the cover is what attracted me to the book, and that's why I bought it. The title was interesting. I'm like, oh, Nourishing Traditions, that sounds interesting. And I believed that it probably would confirm and validate everything that I had been doing, because I thought I was doing this great stuff of having this great diet and feeding my son a great diet. And the first 65 pages after I read them, I was so depressed. And we were on my husband had a business trip in Hawaii, and we were on this trip in Hawaii, and I was reading this book while we were there. And the whole time I'm sitting by the pool crying, because I realized what a huge mistake I had been making. And I realized that all of his health conditions were likely, if not directly caused, certainly heavily influenced by the diet we had been eating. So at that point, I realized that I had no idea about nutrition. And, this was, as I say, 20 years ago. He'll be 24 next week. So, it just smacked me in the face. I have no idea what I'm supposed to be eating and what I'm supposed to be feeding my child. And I had no idea about nutrition. And so I sought out for myself nutrition education. I was like, I need to start learning. And I started doing my own research and realized very quickly that I needed to have a better foundation to be able to discern the information that is credible and actually comes from a place of science and the research, and that is really promoted by I think in many ways sort of nefarious backers. And so I started my own nutrition education. My college degree had nothing to do with nutrition education. So I started my own, and I went to school, and I actually went to this school, Nutrition Therapy Institute. And my mind was blown. And every day while I was in school, I would just be really appreciative of being exposed to this information and having my eyes opened to what truly is the science of nutrition. And so, I went through school, I became an instructor here, and I just continued learning and really delving into the research. And so, I eventually ended up buying the school in 2019, and that's how I got to where I am today. But I look at where people are not forced, but their only resort for getting nutrition education if they don't intentionally seek it out. And that is from, mainstream media. And it is really, quite honestly, most people get their nutrition education from walking down the aisles in the grocery store and reading the labels on the front of the packages. And you see these labels on the front of the packages: low fat, no cholesterol, all these things, heart healthy, all of these labels. And you get the impression that by buying those foods, picking those things up, those highly processed, ultra processed foods off the shelf, you get the impression that you're doing something good for yourself because ostensibly someone, the federal government, is allowing these things to be sold, and therefore they must truly be healthy because they're the ones who are supposed to be kind of on the lookout for, quote unquote, protecting us. Yeah. And I see this all the time when I go into, sort of traditional, mainstream, conventional grocery stores, that people really have no idea how to make food choices. And the number of students that we have coming through our school who say, I had no idea, and this was a life-changing, transformational experience, and the education that I got here changed my life because now I truly understand about how my food choices impact my health. I just, every day, this belief that you need to intentionally seek out nutrition education gets validated every single day. Mm-hmm. So that's my long answer to your question.
I love that. It's so many of our stories, right? Like our kids are sick and we don't know why, or we're sick, or a loved one is sick. Mm-hmm. And it comes back to food for us. And I really resonate with that. Mm-hmm. And I also, it's so confirming too, like, for me, I was like, yes, adults need to know information about food, but like, let's start at our kids. Like, let's start with our kids young. Yeah. And so that's been really fun for us, like teaching our kids early on, setting examples. Obviously, they're watching what we buy at the grocery store or at the farmer's market, or they come with us to our beef pickup, or they watch Joey butcher a deer. Like all these things are adding pieces to the puzzle.
It's demystifying.
It's demystifying it. I was looking up there because the book is up there. It's that yellow one, Nourishing Tradition.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Love Sally Fallon's work. I'm a big fan of hers.
Yeah.
But I think too, like, I'd love to get into some of the how you decipher information. So for example, I just had a woman message me and she said, how do I get across the truth about saturated fats? Because I just had a friend who went to her, I think it was like a raw milk goat pickup, like a goat milk pickup. And they actually decided to nix the raw goat milk and go for almond milk because it was lower in saturated fats. And she's like, I don't know how to communicate this effectively because everyone, right, is telling you that saturated fat is bad. Naturally occurring animal fats are bad. So like, how do you shape someone's compass when they're saying, okay, what is science-based versus industry-funded information?
Yeah. Well, in our program, we definitely delve into all the science and talk about the research studies. And, so much of this information about saturated fats being bad has been sort of ingrained into our psychology about food for decades, since the 1970s and maybe even before. And, they say that the more you repeat something, the more it becomes true, even though it may not be a truth. Yeah. It just becomes much more challenging to question and much more challenging to think, oh, wait a minute, like, is that true because it's true, or is that something that people just keep saying? So, but my first, like, the thing that was most encouraging to me, and this happened in 2010, so almost 15 years ago, the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition, which is one of the largest impact nutrition journals that is used by nutrition experts, dietitians as their primary resource, they came out with a study in 2010 that said there is no significant evidence for concluding that dietary saturated fat is associated with an increased risk for cardiovascular disease. And so this is not new. It's just that study did not make the headlines. And so you have a situation where there is research out there that is like all over the place saying saturated fat is not bad, but you cannot get traction for that message on mainstream media or in conventional, dietary guideline information, because these places that distribute the information are so inundated with messaging from their industry supporters. And there are definitely vested interests in industries to hide this information that saturated fats are not bad. So, how do we do it here? We do it just by actually going through the studies that make it clear that saturated fats are not bad, and cholesterol is not bad. It's the saturated fats and dietary cholesterol that are the two of the most demonized constituents in whole foods that prevents people from eating a nutrient-dense diet, particularly a nutrient-dense diet that has animal foods.
Yep.
Animal foods tend to be the best source of many nutrients, and in some cases, the only source of nutrients. And so when you start thinking about that and you start asking yourself these questions like, well, wait a minute, if animal foods are the only source of certain nutrients like B12 and the primary source of other nutrients like iron and zinc and, from a dairy foods perspective, calcium, but that conflicts with this message that we should be avoiding animal foods because they're so high in saturated fats, and saturated fats are going to kill us by causing heart disease. There's this cognitive dissonance, and it requires the individual to opt out of this entrainment from the corporate captured world where our federal regulatory agencies and nutrition guidance agencies like the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics are completely captured by the industries that support them. And you just have to opt out of that. You have to make an intentional decision to opt out of that and be open to doing your own research and learning and hearing from other resources that are considered fringe or considered, the new favorite word, purveyors of misinformation. This has been going on for decades. And those people who are trying to get the message out about the benefits of animal foods and the fact that saturated fats are not toxic and there's nothing dangerous about consuming saturated fats, they've been maligned for years. And, and it requires an individual choice to open your eyes when you have that cognitive dissonance. Like, well, wait a minute. That's what happened to me. The diet that I was consuming that I said was not in support of certainly my son's health, but even mine and my husband's. It was a vegan diet and, low fat vegan diet. And that was so heavily reinforced. Like, you're doing the best thing you can for your health, for the health of your child, for your long-term survival. You're not going to get heart disease and everything's going to be great and everything's going to be rosy. And it turns out it wasn't. And I will say that as soon as I learned about the importance of animal foods and I reintroduced, animal foods, we had been vegan for 10 years. My son did not get another cavity after those initial 10.
Wow.
So, if it was truly a genetic issue, he would have been getting cavities his entire life.
Totally.
But after that initial instance, I introduced animal foods, including raw milk, And he never got another cavity after that. At least while he was eating my food in my house.
Yeah. Well, you had some control.
Yes. So a little bit of something different happened once he became a teenager and started making his own food choices. But while he was under my control, he never had another cavity. And I will say his asthma went away, and so did my husband's asthma go away.
That was going to be my next question is, did his asthma and eczema get resolved? Because that's something I've heard time and time again. The raw milk is like the antidote.
What is it that we're lacking in those sorts of, in a vegan diet that causes us to develop things like cavities?
Yeah.
Like
it's the fat soluble vitamins. It's vitamin A, D, and K2. That's what causes the cavities. And the minerals. And so calcium being, a very important mineral for bone health. And, I know everyone says that even in the holistic nutrition world, you shouldn't be eating dairy foods. Dairy foods are toxic. They're inflammatory, But conventional dairy versus raw dairy are two completely different things. And then when you get to the additional level of A2 raw dairy, you've got a wholly different thing.
Yeah.
So, but it's the fat soluble vitamins in the animal foods that's really missing in a vegan diet. And that's what we had been missing for 10 years in our diet.
So raw milk is just like the hyper amplified Flintstone vitamins that we always needed.
That's kind of how I view it.
Okay.
I'm like, any way I can get it in our kids. And you even said that today. You're like, even if this protein shake isn't synthesized all the way, at least I'm getting my raw milk in.
Yeah.
True.
Yeah.
I love that. I think first, if I was going to break it down and hold someone's hand, I would say step one, understand that you will be uncomfortable with the new information that you get.
Absolutely.
Because and that's how I felt too. You almost go through a grieving period where you're angry at yourself, angry at the maybe people that gave you misguided information, but then you got to move past that really quickly and you got to move into action mode, especially if you're a mom and you've got the timeline of young kids and you don't have years and years and years to figure it out. You got to figure it out in weeks or months. And especially if you have sick kids. And so it's okay, you're going to be uncomfortable for a little bit of time. Then you have to get really resourceful and figure out where you can get your information from, and then where you can maybe get plugged into the types of food networks that you need to get plugged into to gain access to things like raw dairy, or maybe local pasture raised meats or quality eggs, things like that. So that's kind of the process you have to go through. And I think all of us on this real food journey have walked in that in some time or another, and it's first the initial step of why this is so frustrating, and then I'm trying to mesh these two opposing views together, and you have to sit with them for a minute and maybe dig back the layers and say, well, where is this one coming from and where is this one coming from? Is one time tested? Is one kind of new? That's where I kind of go with the whole seed oil situation. The other analogy I like to say is listen, say we went to a non-industrialized part of the world and we tried to implement the USDA guidelines on this non-industrialized portion of the world. Well, if you read the USDA guidelines, they'd want you to build a facility to manufacture seed oils. They'd want you to discard all your animal fat. They'd want you to only kill the chickens and eat the fish and not have any red meat. And then they would want you to build facilities to refine and pasteurize and homogenize all the dairy you're milking from your cows or your goats, or better yet, grow or ship or import a bunch of almonds and turn that into almond milk, right? They would want you to change so much out of nature's laws. And I'm if we can't take our food guidelines and stamp them on another place that doesn't have the infrastructure, that tells me that our food guidelines are built by the industry.
Yeah.
And that right there is a problem. So I didn't have a question there, but I'm just trying to walk the listener through, how the many stages of feeling.
Yeah. I totally agree with you. I mean, that's exactly what happened to me. I had this time period of complete devastation, realizing that, I was the one who was making the decisions about food for our family. And I was making the decision that we were going to be vegan. And when I was confronted with the fact that that was not, that decision was not in support of our health, not only short-term health, but long-term health, I was devastated. But as you say, like I had to pull out my big girl pants and figure it out. And I immediately started looking for a source for raw milk. And, 20 years ago, that was not easy. It's easier now. But 20 years ago, it was not easy. We were lucky in Colorado that just within like maybe 1 or 2 years prior to that, Colorado had passed a cow share, system of accessing raw milk. And that's what we still have today. It's a cow share program. So, I pay my farmer a share of a cow, and for that share of my cow, I get, a certain amount of milk on a weekly basis. And I've been with the same raw milk farmer for 20 years. And, but yeah, you definitely, but the key is that you have to immerse yourself in the research and, as you say, become uncomfortable. And really that uncomfortableness that I started to have was based on the fact that I realized that I just had no foundation on which to have a way to assess the credibility of the information that I was hearing and that I was reading, because, there's all kinds of ways to get information, and you have to have a way to assess the credibility and actually be able to identify, well, these people have a really big voice and they're saying this, and these people have a really big voice, well, maybe not a really big voice, and they're saying this. Who is the general population person more likely to believe? It's the people with the really big voice. Yeah. And you have to dig down and understand, as you said, the people with the really big voice, the reason why they have that really big voice is because they have lots of money behind them. And they have a vested interest in making sure that voice stays big to support their financial interests. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like we all want to praise the information age for, we have all this access to so much more information. But we're lacking so much in wisdom because we didn't get things passed down from actual vetted sources. Now we just hear these big talking heads and we don't even know how they came to be on this platform. And it makes it really confusing. So I feel that.
What are some of the major instances where we've seen influence of commercial, like infrastructure influencing dietary guidelines? What would be some like really easy examples?
Well, I mean, the committee that wrote so there's an official dietary guidelines for Americans, the DGA, and these are the dietary guidelines that are put out. It's collaboration with the Food and Nutrition Board and USDA, and there's all kinds of federal agencies that contribute to this. And there's a board of, most recently, they're put out every 5 years. So the most recent one is the 2020 to 2025 Dietary Guidelines for Americans, DGA. And 19 out of the 20 people who are on that board for making those decisions have ties to either big food industries or pharmaceutical industry, and oftentimes it's both. So 19 out of 20 of them are making decisions for that are the basis of food policy, certainly in the school lunch program, in hospitals, in the military, information that you're getting from medical doctors. 19 out of 20 of them recognize that the decisions that they make, that they put into the DGA, I can't put myself in their head, but they are financially rewarded by their financial ties to these industries by making decisions that are going to support the consumption of foods that are not necessarily in support of our health. So that's just one example. You asked for one, that's probably one of the biggest one. And then, so I mentioned the AND, the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics, which is the sort of umbrella guidance agency for dietitians, which our school, we train holistic nutrition therapists, which are not licensed dietitians. They are it's a certification. But the AND, again, Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics, who professes to be the purveyor of the information about nutrition that is, supposed to be the most reliable source of nutrition information. Well, there was a big hullabaloo, not so much in mainstream media, but certainly in my field, a big hullabaloo. Last fall, October 22, there was an article that was written called "The Corporate Capture of Nutrition Profession in the U.S., the Case of the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics." So that was the title of the article. And they went through to describe how the AND is funded by Coca-Cola, Pepsi, Nestle, the sugar industry. And so when you have this organization that denigrates, what I do, which is a school for holistic nutrition, they denigrate us and say that we don't know what we're talking about and that we are providing information that is not, evidence-based and all this kind of stuff. And yet we don't get it. I don't get any funding from Pepsi or Coca-Cola, there is no industry funding that is influencing what we have in our curriculum. But yet the information that they're providing, that they're, supposed to be the official expert of what nutrition information is, they're funded by all of these companies, industry that is completely being financially rewarded by them making statements like, well, sugar containing foods are a part of an entire diet, and while they shouldn't be a majority, there's nothing wrong with having a little bit. That's a really general summary of things that they would say, but and that to me just seems really dishonest and disingenuous, and essentially just pandering to it's being support of the industries.
So there's organizations that are releasing guidelines that impact nutritional protocols in America that are influenced by boards, and a lot of these boards and or fundings that are coming to these organizations are coming from these big companies. And I like what you said, right? Because you even made the comment like, I'm not in their heads, so I don't know exactly what they're thinking.
Right.
And we can't prove that they are making decisions purely to make money. We can't prove that. But what we can say is, some of the decisions they're making seem off. And I want to get into the Tufts University, because I feel like this is a great segue into that study or write-up or whatever they did.
Yeah.
But we can identify, right? We can't prove that there's malintent.
That's true.
But what we can reasonably assess that there's a conflict of interest, right?
Yeah.
And when you've got a conflict of interest, that's not us saying we know what they're doing is bad. What we can say is, hey, the science that we're seeing is not necessarily lining up with what they're saying. And you've got people that will benefit if they make decisions that benefit, like they are in control of their own destiny in some capacity. That'd be like the oil industry also having like control over boards for environmental impact.
Well, I'm sure that happens
too. They
do.
Well, there you go. So, well, hey, you know what?
It's bad that we laugh about that, but I'm just like, that's surely everyone's got their hands in each other's pockets. For me, the question is like, well, okay, let's reverse this thing. Like, let's reverse engineer it. Why would Coca-Cola care about any of this nutritional guideline committee thing? Like, why would they care? Well, like, so why would they fund something that virtually has no, like, they're a soda company. So then you ask yourself why they're funding, And then you have to kind of muddle through that, like, well, is it benefiting them in some way? And if so, well, then is their money being put in those pockets changing the actual nutritional advice? And that's where it gets really scary, not only for our school-aged kids in public school, but for our military folk.
Yeah.
And for our folks in like correctional facilities who have no other choice but to eat that. I'm just like, every single publicly funded lunch or dinner meal is impacted by these guidelines. And here we have Coca-Cola dictating.
Yeah, I mean, like the business side of me wants to say that Coca-Cola, PepsiCo, Nestle, these companies are far bigger and more diverse than, you know, the chocolate bar, the Coca-Cola, and the Pepsi. They've got PepsiCo owns like fast food restaurants. They own, you know, like orange juice. Like they own Gatorade. PepsiCo owns probably most of what we see in like the Frito-Lay. They probably own most of what you see in the grocery store. And then Coca-Cola is similar. Like they've got like their portfolio is gigantic.
It's just a big consolidation.
So when you think about it, if you were to look for who has the most authority in the food industry today, some of these leaders of Coca-Cola, PepsiCo, you know, General Mills, like these kinds of folks are, I mean, they're making huge decisions. I mean, they're rolling out all kinds of stuff. They're
more than just small batch making sodas.
They're not just making soda.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's get into this Tufts thing. So this has been circulating the internet for probably a year now. And we'll link the image in the show notes, but for those who don't know, Tufts University put out kind of like a food grading score, maybe is what you would call this. And folks in the holistic health world were really up in arms about it because they ranked some of our most nutrient-dense foods as the very worst ones to consume. Our beautiful, you know, ground beef and our eggs cooked in butter. And then the things that ranked highest on the list, of course, are highly processed manufactured goods like cereals and other things like that. So talk to us about, because there's no common sense here, but Tufts is a very prestigious university. So someone sitting in a room had to come up with a reason why they could extrapolate this kind of data and turn it this way. So talk to us about how this kind of got developed.
Yeah, well, so it's called the Tufts Food Compass, and it came out in October 21. So, you know, it's been a year and a half. And as you say, you know, it's a food rating system. And, you know, just as examples, they give Kellogg's Frosted Mini Wheats a score of 83 out of 100, with 100 being the best. And they give ground beef a 26, eggs fried in butter, as you mentioned, 29, and cheddar cheese is 28. And anything less than, anything over 70 is classified as to be encouraged in the diet. So we are to encourage Kellogg's Frosted Mini Wheats in the diet because it's over 70 at 83. And then foods under 30 are to be minimized. You know, that's how they classify that rating system. And so ground beef, eggs fried in butter, cheddar cheese are on the list of things that should be minimized. And you know, you can find, so in order to see the full list of all the foods that they rated and the ranking system for all those foods, you have to go to the supplemental materials. So when you look at their original publication of their research of the Tufts Food Compass, that paper is is open to the public, but you can't download it. Like, you can only get it, you know, by looking at it on their site. But in order to see the full list of all of the foods that they ranked, you can download for free the supplemental materials. And so you can get the full list, and it's like, you know, it's a 100-page long document. And you go through all these foods, and it becomes a little like comical and so predictable that all the foods that are animal foods that animal foods have saturated fat. Animals, including humans, produce saturated fats as a part of their normal metabolism. And so it is so predictable that all the animal foods, particularly beef-based animal foods, rank really low on this list. And that is the only thing that is downgrading their ranking is the fact that they have saturated fats, because the Tufts Food Compass, so they do their evaluation within 9 what they call domains, and there are 54 different attributes that are measured within these 9 domains. And these attributes are things like, vitamins, minerals, phytochemicals, protein. And then they have, I think 2 or 3 of the domains have to do with fats. So like comparing saturated fats to unsaturated fats. And then just the quantity of saturated fat, and then the quantity of total fat. Pardon me. So they are evaluating, these nutrient-dense foods like ground beef, like eggs. They're evaluating these foods, but and so there has to be some sort of recognition that these foods contain the vitamins and minerals that we know they do. And that's why, from a holistic nutrition standpoint, we qualify those foods as nutrient-dense foods. But, and I don't know everything about what went into the development of the Tufts Food Compass, because I wasn't on the committee that did it. It was a years-long process. But it's very clear that there's a much heavier weighting on fat content overall and saturated fats in particular to downgrade these foods that do contain vitamins and minerals and protein that the Tufts admittedly considers necessary to get a qualification of being healthy, nutrient dense. They're saying that that foods have to have vitamins and minerals and protein and fiber and not have additives. That's another thing they rank, whether or not the food has additives. And so this is why it's so shocking that frosted mini wheats ranks an 83 and ground beef ranks a 26, because frosted mini wheats certainly has additives. Mm-hmm. And the only reason why frosted mini wheats ranks higher is because the vitamins and minerals that are contained in frosted mini wheats are added. It's not something that's inherent to the food. They are added, synthetic vitamins, mm-hmm. Added. And yet the ground beef that inherently is high in vitamins and minerals, B12 in particular, zinc, iron, just because it has saturated fat is going to get a very much lower ranking. And, so those are the things that are most appalling to someone who is a holistic nutrition therapist, because it clearly favors food manufacturers that add things to their foods like vitamins and minerals, sort of they do it because in some ways it's required, because when you're using processed refined grains, there is a requirement to add certain nutrients back in. The federal government requires that they fortify those foods because they're not using whole grains. But they also use that as a way to market themselves and promote themselves as, we're doing something good for you. Like Total Cereal, they always come to mind. And Total Cereal also ranks high on the Tufts list. I can't remember what number it is. I actually think it's higher than the frosted mini wheats. But, the marketing campaign for Total Cereal used to be, and I haven't looked at it lately, but 100% of 13 important vitamins and minerals. Well, the only reason total cereal has 100% of 13 important vitamins and minerals is because it's added. Whereas, let's go back to ground beef. Ground beef, one serving of ground beef is like, I don't know, something like, my math is my memory for the math is escaping me, but it is something like 1,200% of your B12. Well, nothing was added to that. Mm-hmm. And it just is inherent, naturally occurring, and it's one of the best sources. So how is it that it continues to be okay to demonize ground beef just because it contains saturated fat? It is just, it's insulting, quite honestly, to someone who is trained to understand the value of whole foods, the nutritional value of whole foods, and to recognize and know the most reliable sources of some of these nutrients that can be harder to find in other foods. So, anyways, like, I have a whole rant about that. So clearly.
No, I love it. And it's true. Like, if you look at nature, so often the vitamins that are supposed to be paired and consumed together are there naturally occurring. So like to tout that you have like all 13, they're all synthetic, and we're not necessarily saying they're synergistic in their ability to be used by the body, but here they are. It's so, like you said, offensive to people that are like, but like my cod liver oil has a perfect balance of vitamins A and D. And so that's what I'm going to take instead of taking your synthetic D3 or whatever you want me to take. Like, I'm just going to take the real food source. And it's also, it's so frustrating how marketing can zone in on a singular nutrient, and it can completely almost like re-educate the consumer of like, oh, I didn't know I needed that. Okay, yeah. Or, oh, I didn't know that was bad, but this is free of it, so I guess that means it's good, It's a big manipulation game, and it's really, really saddening.
What do we think Tufts has to gain from this? Like, that was just what was going through my head.
Yeah,
like,
what are they doing?
Why are they doing this?
Well, okay, so I honestly can't answer that question. I don't know if there are financial interests on amongst the people who were authors of this Tufts Food Compass. I did look at the study to see what their conflict of interests were. And, one of the authors listed like 4 or 5 different conflicts of interest. I only saw one that was a company that I recognized. Others, they weren't companies that I recognized, and I didn't really investigate what these companies do. And then, it said that none of the other authors have reported conflicts of interest. Of course, I don't think there's enforcement of the requirement for them to report their conflicts of interest if they choose not to. I don't know of any enforcement mechanism to, make them do that. So I can't say that any of them are getting any sort of financial benefit by doing this. But Tufts University, all universities that do research get funding from a wide variety of locations, including government agencies, which themselves are compromised, and private industries. And so, Tufts University may have some sort of financial influence, but I can't say. I don't want to.
It's an interesting thought, though, because it feels like quite a bit of effort with presumably, at a university like this, smart people. Like, we're not talking about like a bunch of kids like, well, what do you want to have for
They're like,
dinner, Johnny? And he's like, mini wheats, put the mini wheats on there. Like, these are adults that are educated and are thinking, and like, I just, so. Like, I just am thinking back to like the commercials of the Frosted Mini. It's like Tiger Woods. It's like That's the only thing going through my head when I hear that. But it is an interesting thought. What does Tufts have to gain from releasing something that would seem so clearly false?
It's the same Coca-Cola question I asked before. Like, okay, we don't know, what they have to gain, but like, why would they be funding these? These committees? That's the question. And if you can't figure out the answer, then we have to assume what the obvious answer is.
So how is this Tufts universe, like how is this food rating, how is this affecting our daily lives, and other than us being able to talk about it today?
Yeah, well, I think that certainly the AND, the Academy of Nutrition Dietetics, likely relies on or distributes some guidance that is being influenced by the Tufts Food Compass, and food policy, government food policy will have some sort of influence from the Tufts Food Compass as well. This is kind of has broad influence on what quote unquote authorities are telling us lowly consumers that we should be eating. And it also influences, the ability for companies to petition the FDA to get certain approvals for labeling on food packaging. So there are a variety of ways in which these big name food rating, food guideline information that are, coming from a research endeavor are being used to give information to the public. And whether that's through media or through a governmental agency, through a medical practitioner, or through food labeling, package labeling.
Yeah, I know someone who their longtime physician just told them, yeah, we're going plant-based. And I immediately was like, maybe it's time to find a new physician. Yeah. Unfortunately. So, to bring it full circle, this now gives companies like Kellogg the agency to say, I can now make this claim on my packaging because of what Tufts has said. So now my consumer who doesn't have any idea what the Tufts scale is rating will shop in the grocery store, look in the aisle, and they will see
studies that are showing that
this is a better choice.
Yes.
This ranks 80 on a scale of 1 to 100, all the vitamins, right? And it comes back to your point earlier where you're like, most people are getting their nutrition education at the grocery store.
That's right.
Which is so true.
From food labels. Yep.
So if we were to create our own food compass, and just
oh, that's a great question.
Well, what would be some of the top items that we would put in the top?
Okay, I have mine, but I obviously want to hear Dianne.
Yeah, well, so for me, my foods that always are on the top ranking are liver is my primary one. Liver is one of the most nutrient dense foods that you can eat. I think that raw dairy is very high on the list. I like meats. Ground beef is kind of a mainstay in our house. I also think wild caught fish is really important to include. It doesn't need to be every day, but certainly on a weekly basis. And then let me see if those are all of my animal food sources. Eggs, something that makes it into my diet on a daily basis. Whole eggs, we don't take out the yolks. The yolks is like the most important part. If you're gonna get rid of any part of the egg, it should be the white, not the yolk. Yeah. And then from there, like leafy greens, I think are really important. But I think those would be my top 5.
So liver. Can we talk about liver for a second?
Yeah.
If let's say we don't care for the taste of liver.
Sure.
Just theoretically.
Sure.
What would be a good substitute, or what is this person theoretically missing out on?
Yeah. So, when you do a side-by-side comparison of the nutrition facts for liver versus, really anything else. Liver is always going to rank the highest. It's always going to have, huge percentages of your daily value. So in many cases, 3.5 ounces of liver can be almost, can meet almost 100%. It's not 100. It's high 50s, 60s, sometimes 90s, but in many cases, it's over 100% in all of the reportedly important nutrients. So liver is one of the most nutrient dense foods. What I tell people and what we talk about here is, for those people who theoretically don't appreciate the taste of liver, you can do desiccated liver supplements. Mm-hmm. Certainly, that's the most commonly recommended substitute for eating liver. But another thing that kind of a DIY is taking liver when it's still a little bit frozen, but you can cutting it into little pieces and creating your own quote unquote liver pills, refreezing that, and then you cut them small enough so that they're easy to swallow, and then you just pop those.
Interesting.
But I will tell you that, coming from being a vegan for 10 years, when Sally Fallon, again, the two of the things that is promoted the most by Sally Fallon and the Weston Price Foundation is raw milk and organ meats, particularly liver. And so I was all on board for organ meats and other animal foods, but the liver came a little bit later because I also had a little bit of a fear, and I was apprehensive about like my family not eating it and kind of, refusing to eat it. And then I would feel deflated because I was trying to do something good. It was all this mental like chaos that happened. But in the Nourishing Traditions book, she has a chicken liver pate recipe that I will tell you is the absolute best gateway drug into eating liver, because it tastes fabulous. It's got, chicken livers and mushrooms and lots of butter. So it tastes really good. So if you've never made that or never had that, try that. Chicken liver tends to be a little bit less profound of a taste. Yeah. But we're not only a nutrition school, but we're also we have a chef program, a professional chef training program, and we have a whole repertoire of liver and other organ meat recipes that we teach, where people are shocked at how good it tastes and how inoffensive it is. And so a lot of it has to do with the way you're cooking the liver. So for those people who theoretically may not like the taste of it, there are different preparation techniques that can be used to get over that.
I mean, I just have no idea who that person could be, but just in case,
My strategy is I hide it in things. So anytime we do ground meat, like a meatball or a taco or nacho or something like that, I'll chop it real fine, because you really only need like a couple servings a week to like check your boxes. So that's why in What's for Dinner every week there's like 2 options. And if you don't love liver, like I like heart more than liver. You're not the same nutrient profile, but it's an organ meat and it's a little bit closer to that muscle texture because it is a muscle.
So we're talking any liver, just to clarify here. So not like beef liver. We have most access to venison liver. Yeah. But like, is it any liver?
And any liver of any animal, if you can get it. So if you can get venison liver, that would be great. I think venison liver would have even more of a flavor profile than beef, much more gamey than even beef, but chicken liver is good. There are differences in the nutritional profile. So chicken liver is actually higher in some nutrients than beef liver, and right off the top of my head I can't remember what they are. I'd have to look at our chart that we use in our chef program, but so having a variety is going to be helpful. And and like Liz said, you don't have to eat it every single day. I choose to eat it every single day. We include it in my own personal home. We do eat liver every day. not pounds of it, but, some amount. But you don't have to, I do think it's important to get in as often as you can, even if that's just once or twice a week.
Yeah.
So,
what's in your food compass?
Well, I was going to ask you go first, because, I'm kind of the chump here that I'll tell you what tastes good.
Yeah.
But why don't you give me what you would add to the list?
I mean, all the things mentioned above, right? Liver's great. Any kind of, we eat a lot of red meat because we are a hunting family, so we have a lot of venison, and we also buy, bulk beef. But we also eat chicken and fish, and we try to vary our proteins. I would add to the list, huge raw milk fan, obviously. Big meat stock fan. We do a lot of meat stock. We cook that weekly. We use it for cooking our rice or making soups. So I would add meat stock to the list. Let's see. I wouldn't even put sourdough on there because I don't think it's a vital food group. But if you are going to consume grains, it's your best bet, in my opinion. So if you're going to, kind of like how Bill Schindler was like, listen, you don't need grains, but if you're going to consume them, might as well be like the best, most beautiful fermented product possible. I'm a big fan also of the leafy greens, or honestly any kind of well-digested vegetable, because I think for a long time I grew like a fear of vegetables almost. Like I was like, oh, I only need to eat animal-based foods because they're the most digestible, and then I realized like, no, I need plant fibers. Like I need to eat a little bit more vegetation. And I think that gets kind of scrambled in the holistic health world too, is like only eat your butter and your eggs and your liver. And then people are like, I'm having weight issues. And I'm like, you need vegetables as part of your
I think salads are a good thing.
I do too. And I'm so sad because people are demonizing the salads,
Yeah.
I'm not saying I'm eating a bunch of raw broccoli, but I do love a good salad. And I put lots of nutrient-dense foods in my salad, right? I don't, I love a good cold-pressed olive oil in my dressing, and apple cider vinegar, and hard-boiled eggs, and cheese. Like, I load my salads up. They're very nutrient-packed.
Yeah. And then if you can add some wild greens to your salad, there's all kinds of wild greens, certainly in my yard. And my yard is overgrown with wild greens right now. But, start adding wild greens, then suddenly you really up-level the nutritional value. I think I agree with you. And, the one food that we didn't talk about is fermented vegetables. I think fermented vegetables play a really important role in an optimal diet because they're so beneficial for gut health. And many people cannot tolerate raw vegetables, I really don't think anyone needs to be eating raw broccoli.
But for a number of reasons.
That's a pass.
For a number of reasons. Not even just, do you want raw broccoli?
No, it's not.
Yeah, okay. It definitely doesn't taste good. Cooked with butter, it's great, but raw, not so good. But I think there are many people who can't tolerate raw vegetables, but fermented vegetables, that pre-digestion that you have, and the presence of the probiotic bacteria and the active enzymes, I just think that can be really healthful and nourishing, particularly to those who can't tolerate raw vegetables, or really for anybody. And I try to include fermented vegetables in my diet on a daily basis as well.
How much of a factor does from person to person, so let's say me to Elizabeth, and or our activity levels, or what our body's demanding of us, like what we're demanding of our bodies, I guess would be a better way to say that. Like how much does that affect what we should be eating on a regular basis? And so an example I would give is I found myself really having to refigure out my diet when I trained for a marathon. And so I was running a lot and I was eating a lot more, and I would find myself days where I'd feel like, wow, like I don't even feel like I ran today. I feel like I have a lot of energy. And other days where I was like, man, that wasn't like a super severe run, but I'm feeling kind of tired. And I'd always think back, like, what was I eating today? And I would go hyper, like onto one end of the spectrum. I'd eat tons of protein, and then Elizabeth like, did you have any carbs today?
Yeah, he would be like carb free,
and I'd
it's
be
like, you're burning so much
I'd be
energy.
like, I've been lifting today, and I ran today, and I just wanted to really get my protein up. She's like, well,
Eat some
that's good.
carbs.
Eat some carbs. And I'd be like, okay, well, what carbs? So just curious your thoughts on the dynamic from person to person, but also activity levels.
Well, that is huge. And, you know, one of the focuses we have here at NTI is that everyone has unique biochemical individuality. Everybody has unique needs for their nutrient intake on an overall, but also on a day-by-day basis, depending on their activity level or their stress level. Something that I was reading the other day that really reminded me about this is that everything comes down to energy metabolism. And so, there's this whole, like, if you were to look at a picture of energy metabolism, it is huge. Like, we have a poster of it in our classroom. It's a huge poster with thousands of different reactions that are happening inside every single cell to feed into and eventually generate cellular energy. And everything that happens in the body is dependent on how much energy can those cells produce. And every single one of those thousands of reactions that are happening are dependent on the presence of, especially vitamins and minerals, but also fatty acids, also protein, also carbohydrates, also, phytonutrients, nutrients, not vitamins and minerals, but other kinds of nutrients that come from plants. So the demand that each person has for their energy needs because of their physical activity level or their stress, like physical activity and stress, I think are the two biggest influences on the demand for energy. And when you look at that chart that looks really complex and really confusing, and it is, like I said, thousands of different chemical reactions that are happening. If you just remember, it all boils down to what's the demand for energy and what are you feeding into the system, in by way of vitamins, minerals, protein, carbohydrates, all those kinds of things. What are you feeding into that system so that you can create enough ATP for that cell and those cells to function normally? So yeah, on a day when you're really heavily active in physical activity, whatever it is, lots of different kinds of physical activities, there are going to be higher demands for all of those nutrients, including the carbohydrates and the protein and the fats, but all those vitamins as well, because those chemical reactions, it's not like the cells are like, okay, I don't have the nutrients that are necessary for this chemical reaction to happen, so I'm just going to bypass it and go on, skip over it and go on and do something else. No, it stops and waits for the nutrient to come in. Yeah. That's not a complete true statement. There are many redundancies so that we don't die in an acute situation of a nutrient deficiency. So there are many redundancies, but in many ways, those redundancies can't keep up if you don't consistently add in all of those nutrients. And eventually, all the compensatory mechanisms that are involved in those redundancies get exhausted, and then it truly does become a situation where cells just can't function. And it may look like, I can't do my whatever 5 or 10 mile run today. I just simply cannot do it because I don't have the energy. Or you get halfway into it and you're like, I can't do it anymore. I can't go. Or, versus I can run 10 miles and I feel great and I still have energy to do whatever else and live my life and do, perform in my day. So that's how I look at it. I always envision this hugely complex chart, and I just think about all of that feeds into how much energy are we producing, and everything boils down to that cellular energy. And what you are providing in order for that energy to be available when it's needed.
It's so interesting. And I think that if I were to talk about what I would add, or my food compass, and that's what I was kind of asking, is I felt like there were some things that I had been prioritizing for myself lately that a lot of which you guys mentioned, but I have definitely been prioritizing some things that would give, like I was eating some rice a good amount of times. And the reason why, I was almost like every day I would have just about a pint or more of raw milk with added protein or collagen peptides in some capacity. That was every day. And then I'd have at least 2 to 3 eggs every day. And that was either for breakfast or lunch. Some days I'd have 6 eggs, but it was like, sometimes I would make fried rice for lunch. So I'd have like 3 or 4 eggs that I would scramble, and then I would do rice, and that was,
it's a great cheap meal.
A little bit of green onions. It's awesome too, because I can like throw a bunch of eggs in the fridge at work, and then I can boil off like 5 cups of rice, and I've got lunch the whole week, and I can just scramble the eggs up, get the rice in there, hit it with butter, toss it together. Outstanding. Anyways, and so I was prioritizing those carbs, and so then in the morning, I used to never eat breakfast most of my life, to be honest. When I really started training, I found breakfast was really helping me a lot, and having some kind of breakfast, whether it was a protein shake with just a big glass of raw milk. I did a lot of yogurt and granola.
Before your run, you had sourdough toast and peanut butter.
Before my actual big runs, I would have sourdough bread with actually it's apple butter that Amber sent us.
Oh, that's funny.
Anyways, but that was what I was eating.
So carb. It was very carb forward.
Very carb.
Because you're about to run.
Correct. I didn't want to eat a bunch of protein, because I found whenever I would do that, I would like feel it in my stomach.
It would be slow to
digest. Yeah. And then post run, I would go heavy on the protein and carbs. I just whatever I could eat.
Yeah.
And but so I guess the only thing I would add to the for when I was highly active is adding a lot of carbs in.
Easy to digest carbs too, because you're eating white rice. I mean, we don't eat brown rice because I just digest it better. And the sourdough is pretty easy to digest. It's still not as easy as fruit might be. But
we were doing like sourdough pizzas that I would eat that were good. I'm trying to think, what other carbs do I eat?
Fruit. You eat a lot of fruit.
A lot of fruit.
Yeah.
A lot of fruit. Actually, tons of fruit.
We love our carbs, but we eat them balanced,
Absolutely.
And that's the element that I would say add to the food compass. Is like, yes, it's about which foods you eat, but it's like how you eat your foods, right? How the principles around your food consumption. You need to be pairing certain foods with certain nutrients or macronutrients with others, and you need to be eating a balanced way. You need to eat differently post-workout than you do pre-workout. These are all the nuances of nutrition, and this is why folks struggle with it. The other thing you said too is like stress and your activity level are the 2 main contributors or influences over our body's metabolizing energy production. And a lot of times I'll hear like, my body's in such a stressed out state because I'm so mentally stressed out that I can't work out. And I want to be like, I get that. I feel that too. But also a light movement, like going for a walk, can not only reduce your stress levels, but also brings up some of that beneficial activity, and it moves your body. So it's like, don't go do like a hardcore CrossFit workout if you're overly taxed and you've been, chronically stressed for 3 years. Don't do that. But can you go for a light walk? Can you begin to do some stretching, like bare minimum, but like moving your body in a way that can start to bring those levels down so that you can start producing the right energy? Because my friends and family who are all the time stressed are also very tired, and it's a really hard place to be.
Yeah, I totally agree. And the thing to think about is that it's not just psychological stress that causes this. There are certain things that they're called, considered sort of deal breakers that are things that are so stressful on the body that they will inhibit your ability to achieve progression of, whatever health condition you're trying to work with, simply because they are so stressful. And, some of those things include like not getting enough sleep. People don't realize that not getting enough sleep is one of the biggest stresses on your body. It's not the same kind of psychological stress as, financial stress and relationship stress and work stress and those kinds of things that we really recognize are stresses. But sleep is one of the biggest impacts on our stress level, or lack of sleep, I should say, that we have. And, it is required for survival. So lack of sleep is one. Poor blood sugar regulation is another, because if you've got poor blood sugar regulation, glucose is used to make energy. And so if you've got poor blood sugar regulation, you're going to have a challenge with your energy metabolism.
And how would one know if they have poor glucose regulation? Because this has been a hot topic on our podcast recently.
Yeah.
So how would people know?
Yeah. You mean without testing or?
Without testing, yeah. I wear a CGM, but so I know my glucose at all times, but Joey doesn't. So how would he know? I'm trying to get in there.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, things that are really obvious about having poor blood sugar regulation is like if you are irritable, when you're hungry, like, when you've gone too long without a meal, do you get irritable? Do you get shaky? Do you get, kind of the hangry symptoms? So that's one sign. Another sign is after you eat, do you get really sluggish and kind of like dulled mental function? That's another sign of poor blood glucose management and utilization. Just simply putting on weight can be a sign of poor blood sugar management, because when you have poor blood sugar management, usually you've got some insulin imbalances, and insulin promotes fat gain. So increasing fat mass can be a sign of poor blood sugar regulation. Just simply having brain fog, like, our brain, the statistics are it's 2% of our body weight, but uses 20% or uses 20% of the body's energy, and therefore 20% of the body's glucose needs are used in the brain for energy. And so having brain fog is another example of a way that someone could potentially say, oh, I've got some blood sugar dysregulation issues. So those are things that, outside of testing. I think the absolute best test, of course, doing a CGM is really good, but also just getting a fasting insulin is a really good marker, as well as an hemoglobin A1C is a really good marker. Those are, of course, our, blood tests. So
let's say, just again, theoretically, that there was someone that did get a little hangry when he was hungry, and then maybe
when he was hungry,
or she, I guess,
Gender
and
neutral.
maybe felt a little sluggish when he or she were to eat said meal. What would be a better way to regulate this person's glucose throughout the day? What would be some suggestions?
Yeah, well, I mean, so of course everyone's different. But I think that what's really shown in the evidence is that your first meal of the day really sets off what your blood sugar is going to do for the day. Yes. And from what I hear you saying about your breakfast, where you're including eggs and that kind of stuff, I think that's great. My personal opinion would be that doesn't contain enough protein. I think it's fine to keep what you're doing, but I would say that you would need to add a little bit more protein to that, just to get your first meal of the day to establish what your blood glucose control is going to be like throughout the rest of the day. So I think that having a really good protein in the morning, like eggs, each egg is the quantification of protein content, the nutrient analysis is 6 grams of protein. Now, of course, some eggs may be a little higher, some eggs may be a little lower, but if we use 6 as an average, if you're eating 3 eggs in the morning, that's 18 grams of protein. And I would say you probably need to have at least 60 to 70 grams of protein. So, of course, you did say that you're doing some protein powder in your shake. So that's good. But I think having adequate protein at the first meal of the day is one of the most effective ways of setting up a good system for the rest of your day.
Well, I'll let this person know,
Yeah.
Give them the advice.
You'll relay the message.
Yeah, I'll let them know.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
I'll let them know.
Sorry. I did use you as my example for the
I think that's
fictitious
fair.
person.
Yeah, it's understandable.
I think you should wear a CGM.
I'd love
Yeah.
to. I'd
Yeah.
love to. I'd be interested.
Tell you.
I'd be interested.
But yeah, I think I mean this is why I hate the cereal industries, because like they have screwed us on our first meal of the day. Like it's so common to feed your kids a sugary bowl of cereal.
That's right.
Like frosted mini wheats though, but
Yeah.
those are good.
Those are so high.
Those are good for you. Yeah.
Oh, it's
They're
so
chock full
With
of
skim
vitamins.
milk. It's got to be with skim milk.
Chock full of
denatured and refined
vitamins.
Yeah.
dairy product is
Yeah.
because they would never include raw dairy on their
No.
dietary guidelines. Yeah. Okay, great. I don't even remember what we were talking
We were
about.
talking about frosted mini wheats and starting
Before
the
we
meal
got
off
into the
You were
glucose.
talking about cereal, starting the day off with cereal.
No, I'm talking about before.
Oh, right on.
Yeah.
Anyways, okay, so I want to hear more about this school. So you have 2 programs.
Mm-hmm.
One is this not Real Food Chef, but one is a chef program,
Yep.
and one is for folks who want to work with individuals and coach them. So walk us through what both of those look like.
Yeah. So we'll start with the chef program. So our program, we call it the Natural Food Chef Program, and it is a professional chef training program. So we teach all the professional chef skills. They come out being experts with knife skills. And all of the different cooking methods, braising, all the stuff. I'm not a chef instructor, and I'm not a professional chef, so I can't use the terminology. But and those students graduate. Well, I forgot to say, we have a very unique take in our program, and that is that not only are we providing the professional chef training so that people know how to prepare foods that taste good and look good. We go a step above, and this is what makes our program completely unique, certainly in the United States, and we've heard in the world, and that is that we also train our chef graduates to be able to prepare meals that promote optimal wellness. And the reason why that happens is because we only use high quality ingredients in our program. We prioritize high quality ingredients. We talk about the nutritional benefit of these ingredients and why they are supporting optimal wellness. We go through, 10 different organ systems, and we talk about what these organ systems require, what nutrients they require in order to perform optimally. And then we go through the foods that contain the nutrients that are necessary for that. And so our graduates are really well prepared to work in a wide variety of ways. That most of them go on to do like personal chefing. We've got graduates who are working for like celebrities and professional athletes, and then they do things like working in retreat centers like yoga retreats, meditation retreats, and they do cooking for that. So, a wide variety of ways that they can use their skills to generate financial security for themselves. So that's the Natural Food Chef program. The nutrition program is kind of our flagship program and what most students come to our school for. This is an in-depth curriculum. It's a 18-month program, that's the minimum amount of time it can take, but we have a lot of flexibility. So some people take, a little bit longer than 18 months. Others take a little bit shorter than 18 months. But so we have 13 courses where they are very in-depth science education about the human body. So everyone starts off taking anatomy and physiology and biochemistry. So they learn about the human body from a structural standpoint. And then they learn about all the biochemical pathways that are used to regulate body function. And then we go into all the clinical application courses, and that's where they learn about how do the nutrients that are found in our foods interact with human biochemistry to bring about the effect of whatever biochemical pathway we're talking about. The other thing we really emphasize is understanding what are the most reliable sources of these nutrients. And the typical example is everybody talks about spinach as a great source of iron and a great source of calcium, Great. Well, the problem is that spinach is really high in oxalates, and spinach is one of the least bioavailable sources of iron and calcium. Even though the iron and calcium are in the spinach, it's not a bioavailable source. And so we really emphasize understanding what are those highly reliable sources, so that when you're working with a client and through doing good intake, getting lots of good information from the client to understand what is their health history, where are they at now, what are their wellness goals that they'd like to work on, so that our graduates can actually help them make meaningful changes, because they truly understand the science of how nutrition works in the human body. So
I love that. Can people do both programs?
Absolutely. So it's pretty challenging to do both of them at the same time. I will just say that up front. They are both very intense programs, and the chef program is even more intense because it is, it's 15 weeks long, and so it's really like immersive. But we have many students who, for example, take the chef program and they have this transformational experience because they start learning about the nutritional value of the foods that they're using to cook with. And that kind of sparks like, oh, I want to learn more and I want to really understand the science of the nutrition. So then they may go on to take the nutrition program. Vice versa, we have students who take the nutrition program when we talk all about the most reliable food sources of these nutrients and why you need to be eating these foods and and how to make menu plans that include these foods. But then, I've had students in the nutrition program, they're like, I felt like I was being a little bit of a fraud because I actually don't know how to cook. So they recognize, well, first of all, we didn't really talk about this earlier, but the only way to truly be healthy for the long term is to cook for yourself. Because when you're relying on someone else to cook your foods, whether it's a restaurant or a food company that's selling a packaged food in a grocery store, they don't have your best interest at heart. They have their financial bottom line at heart. And so the only way to be healthy is to cook for yourself and eat food that you have intentionally sourced the ingredients that you're using to make. So we talk about that in the nutrition program, and people come to the realization, oh, I actually don't feel confident in my cooking skills. And many times as a nutrition therapist, I'm going to be talking to my clients about nutrition, food, nutrients, and the foods that contain those. And they're going to ask me, well, how do I actually implement this? How do I actually do this? I can give them a menu plan, but if they don't know how to cook themselves, I need to be able to tell them how to prepare those foods. And so, so that would be where, a nutrition student transitions and then goes on to do the chef program. and there are lots of other reasons, but that would be an example of the crossover between those two programs. And certainly, they are not required to be both taken by each person, but it certainly up levels your skills, your knowledge, your ability to market yourself and promote yourself, to make this a financially rewarding endeavor. Because the reward that we get by being able to help people is great. That's a psychological reward, being able to have that impact and make a difference in the world by sharing the information that you have. But we also want to make sure that our graduates are able to find financial success, whatever that means to them, financial stability, using this knowledge. And so we want to, provide them with the things that they need to have that. We do have a business course and a coaching skills course where they learn about business skills if they've never done a business for themselves. So, yeah.
Cool. Are these both in person only?
No, so good question. The chef program is, and I would say obviously is, but there actually are lots of cooking courses now that are online, which I feel is a little bit disingenuous because, man, if you don't have your teacher tasting your food, how does your teacher know what you're actually doing? But anyways, so the chef program is completely in person here at our location in Arvada, Colorado. And we have many people who move here and kind of do short-term Airbnb rentals for, you're here for 16 weeks. There's a 1 week break in the middle, for whatever, take time off. But so you're here for 16 weeks. So we have a lot of people who move here. Just recently, we had someone come from New Zealand. Wow. Specifically to take our program. So when I said that this is a unique program in the world, she literally said, I looked everywhere in the world. She's like, I could go anywhere. I looked everywhere for a program like yours and I couldn't find it. And so she came here and relocated for 16 weeks and, absolutely loved the program and all that kind of stuff. But, so that is in person. Our nutrition program, we have 3 different formats. One is in person. We still have in-person teaching, which, is another kind of unicorn that many places don't do in-person learning anymore. But we still do have the space and the desire to provide in-person learning. But this is a longer program, and for those people who don't live in the Denver metro area, our entire program can be taken online, and there are 2 options in the online version. One is a group learning option where you're participating as part of a group online, doing weekly webinar live classes, and then the other one is an independent learning option where you're going through the material on your own, and you can go you can go faster if you want, to speed up and tailor the amount of time it takes you to complete the program. So we try to provide as much flexibility as possible because the reality is that for adults to go back to school is challenging. You've got families, kids, work, and a lot of our students do work full time while they're going to school, and you just have to recognize that you need to commit time to doing school. I mean, this is, we're a real school, so there's homework, there's reading, there's quizzes, there's exams, there's case studies. There is work involved, but we try to make it as flexible. We have flexibility to try and make it as easy as possible.
That's awesome. I love that.
Yeah.
And if people want to learn more, where can they find you?
Yeah, so our website is the best place to go, ntischool.com. We are on Facebook and Instagram and YouTube, and I think those are all the things. And NTI School is always going to be where we're at on all those places. And I'll be really honest. I don't do social media myself, so I don't know exactly what those tags are, but they can be found on our website. But I'm sure it's like at ntischool.com or whatever. Sorry, I'm completely oblivious to social media stuff.
No, I think that's a great place to be.
Yeah.
I would love to be oblivious.
Yeah. So our website, and then we have every Wednesday, we have an informational webinar, which is a live 1 hour webinar that I go through with everyone who's on there. I go through our program and then we take questions. So that's a really good opportunity to have an in-depth, informational lesson about what we do and what we offer.
Yeah, that's so cool. That all sounds amazing. I'm like, can I convince Joey and the fam to move to Denver?
Yeah.
For 16 weeks so I can take this chef program? We'll see.
I'd move to Denver if we could swing it.
Yeah, maybe you could snowboard and the kids
Hunt
could ski.
and great.
I would go cook in a kitchen. Honestly, that would be my dream.
Yeah, well.
We'll see. We'll see if we can make it happen.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, thank you for being here today. This conversation has been awesome.
Yes, thank you.
I've really enjoyed it. Any last thoughts from you?
I've got all my thoughts.
You got your food compass locked in?
We got it locked in.
Cool.
I love it. Yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing your print version of your food compass.
Yeah.
Put it out there as an Instagram whatever thing.
Yeah, we'll make like a graph. Joey's food compass.
There you go.
And high on the list will be his rice and his other foods that he mentioned.
We'll make two. We'll make one for active and one for
times of
less
rest.
active.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it may or may not have liver on it, depending on.
It just depends on the person, on that person's preference.
Yeah.
If you should choose, liver could be on there.
Yeah. Well, awesome. Thank you, Dianne. Thanks for being here, and we look forward to keeping in touch.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. It was a pleasure. I loved it. Thanks.
And with that, Dianne has left the virtual chat.
She has. She was wonderful.
She was. I loved going through. It was so funny. We were talking about the Tufts thing in the kind of, what do you call it, the pre-chat. And I was like, whoa.
We gotta hit record.
Hold on. This is like, I don't know. I want to learn about this, but let's learn about this together.
We should also mention that if you didn't listen to the Kellogg episode yet, go listen to that one, because then you'll have even more context for like why we're so blown away for why Kellogg is
crazy stuff
on the list. Yeah,
crazy stuff. Yeah, these ideas of I'm just reading through my notes here. Trusting the info that we're receiving and how often it can be linked to something else, and sometimes you have to dig to figure out what that is. Like, we still don't really know. Like, what was it that Tufts had to gain from creating this? And they're smart people. It's not like they're idiots, right? We're not assuming that they just completely missed the
But it's anti-common sense. I think that's the part that it gets confusing. And I feel like in our culture, to be completely honest, we are being more and more trained to ignore our common sense and just trust the expert. And it's not served myself well, hasn't served our family well. So any chance we get, we're going back to the common sense. Not saying we don't appreciate academia or science, but when it doesn't align, it doesn't align.
Maybe I will create Joey's marathon training food compass.
You should.
Well, maybe I will. Hey, you know what? Doing some good in the world.
I think people want to hear it.
All the eggs. You know what? I eat boring too. So it's going to be really sad for some people. But hey, optimal marathon performance and nourishment is what we'll call it.
Well, one of the ways to be the most economical is to eat kind of the same thing every day, I found.
That's what I do. It's almost not always about money, which it is definitely about money in some capacity, but it's also about time. I'm like, man, I gotta eat lunch and
an effort to think through what you're gonna eat.
And I did the ground beef for a little while, and it was like, man, just to cook up the ground beef took a long time.
Yeah.
And you can't cook a bunch of ground beef and just have it. Like
it's not good day 2, day 3.
I don't like it like that. I want it to be cooked up. Yeah, right then and there.
So this is why I love What's for Dinner, because, you're talking about, okay, what if you don't love liver?
Yeah.
And so I built that whole program out to say, hey, you can get your liver in. We'll hide it for you. And we'll tell you when to cook it.
Teach you how to hide it.
We'll teach you how to hide it. We'll tell you when to cook it throughout your week. We'll make hidden liver meatballs or hidden liver nachos or hidden liver tacos or hide your liver in your soup. And then you get in these rhythms of like, okay, I can consume organ meat. And then you get into these stock making rhythms. And then you get into these, I mean, what's for breakfast is like, if anything, it's eggs and dairy. Like people say, can I use what's for breakfast if I'm gluten-free? I say, yes, I have a whole page on gluten-free swaps for every recipe that includes some sort of sourdough. And then people say, can I use what's for breakfast if I'm dairy and egg free? And I say no, because there's so much egg and dairy.
It's just everything. Yeah.
And it's because it's such a pivotal, I mean, you heard it right there, Dianne, director and owner of the NTI. It's so pivotal.
It was at the top of our food.
Those are key. Yeah. And they're key in our household. Like you think about what we're stocking every single week. 1.5 gallons of raw milk, 2 to 3 cartons of eggs, sometimes extra raw cream on top of that, butter, yogurt. I mean, so much is animal based. So yeah, we're not like you have to eat grains, but if you're going to eat grains, make them sourdough.
That's good stuff.
Fantastic. Anyways, yeah, that's why I love those 2 meal plans are just, they're developed intentionally for those very.
I mean, if you're listening or watching this and you don't have what's for dinner or what's for breakfast,
it's a mistake.
You should do that. You can find them. They're on homegrowneducation.org. I always want to say .edu. Why do I do that?
Because it's education.
That's why. It's .org.
Yeah, it's .org.
Hazelmeyer Goods.
What are you loving currently?
You know, you were just telling me, I have to be honest, I haven't had all the teas.
You haven't had the Earl Grey?
I haven't had the Earl Grey.
I told you yesterday I had some and it was divine. I've had it before though.
You did. And I've actually been seeing people post about how much they like it. Maybe I need to have some Earl Grey.
It's really, really good.
What is it about it that is so good?
So Earl Grey in general, ours is an Assam black tea, and then it's always mixed with like a bergamot, which is like an orange, which is exactly why my dad doesn't like it, because he doesn't like the zestiness of it. So that's like Earl Grey on its own, but then ours has this, it has actual lavender buds in it. Organic lavender, yes. So it's floral. It's not like it's a huge lavender taste, if like mouthfeel. If I'm honest, it's more of like an aroma. So it smells really lavender-y. It's like very calming. And then I always drink mine with milk and sugar, because if you don't, you're drinking tea wrong. But a little bit of milk and sugar in your Earl Grey, and it's like just the smoothest cup of black tea. I mean, it's black tea and it's caffeinated, so like I wouldn't go make a pot right now at
what time is it? 3:00?
Well, it's 3:00 in the afternoon. You could probably get away with some caffeine. But yeah, I love our Earl Grey. Obviously I love our chai, but I don't even want to talk about it anymore because it keeps selling out.
The chai is ridiculous.
And I've been using our sponge, which I really feel like is my dry brushing routine every single time.
Oh, the body sponge with the soap.
Yeah.
You know what I've been enjoying is that my shower just smells like peppermint.
Yeah.
Like the bathroom does. It's almost like it is the air freshener.
It is.
The shower.
It is the air freshener, yeah. Certified organic peppermint essential oil, organic turmeric, organic
What's
coconut
turmeric
oil.
doing for me?
So the turmeric is supposedly a brightening for the skin, but you can't always make claims about that. So we can just talk about how it could be brightening. A lot of people add it to soap and body care. That's why it kind of gives the soap, it's almost like a brownish tinge. Anytime you see like a vibrant orange turmeric bar, they're probably adding extra color, but ours isn't. It's just the raw material, and it's kind of like a brownish bar, but it's pepperminty and really moisturizing because it's still made with lard, but we also added some coconut for some hardness to the bar, because you don't want your shower bar to be real mushy, and you want it to last several weeks. Well, I don't shower every day, so it lasts me several weeks, but maybe
it lasted definitely a couple weeks. So, and we got 3 bars in the one order. So yeah, go get the body bar and the body sponge. Outstanding. I at first, when I first used the sponge, I was a little bit like, I don't know about this. It's kind of scratchy, and then I was like, it was like a different kind of clean feeling. And using the body sponge on my face is also like.
I was gonna say your skin looks great today. It looks really good.
Thank you.
On your face specifically. Are you using it on your face?
Oh yeah, every day.
Are you kind of going in round circles?
I don't know the technique per se.
I kind of do that. Kind of go in the round
Is that the
and
technique?
push out a little bit. It's almost like yeah. But you can do whatever you want.
Maybe I'll just stick to what I've been doing because apparently it's working.
I'll show you sometime how to do it.
Well, hey, you heard it here first. First compliment. We've been married 8 years, and that's the first skin compliment I've ever received from Elizabeth.
It's probably accurate.
Hey, there you go. Get the body care from Hazelmeyer Goods, shopdh.com. There's all kinds of stuff on there. We got coffee. We like our coffee. We love tea. We've got sourdough tools, things like proofing baskets that are just so legit that, and you know what? It's almost like we don't want to talk about the proofing baskets because we literally just can't keep them in stock. So
it's not because we don't want to. It's just our maker can only
we
produce
are making as many as we possibly can,
a certain amount per month,
and we are selling all of them.
But they restock monthly. So if you didn't get them this month because they are sold out,
so go get on Hazelmeyer Goods.
They'll be restocked.
Shopdh.com. Get on the email list so that when we drop things like the proofing baskets again, you're like the first to know, right? Follow Hazelmeyer Goods, on Instagram. Another place you can grab updates on what's going on inventory wise. Right now, I think. Okay, so we got sourdough tools, tea, coffee. We got dish soap. Again, another. Anyways, the dish soap, outstanding. Again, similar sponge. I guess you could theoretically use it for, your dishes or your face. Is kind of what I'm learning. They're the same sponge, aren't they?
No, they're different sponges.
Are they different sponges? Don't use it on your face.
Sponges. Our dish sponge is a Caribbean silk sponge, comes from the Caribbean. Really soft, kind of firm, and really, really sudsy. And if you're, it's not sudsing, you're not getting your soap deep enough in the sponge.
Also, I'm wondering, I had someone tell me the other day, they were saying that it was leaving a film on their dishes. And when they explained how they used their soap, I'm pretty sure they were taking the bar and just rubbing the bar directly on the dish.
Yeah, that's not what you want to do.
You don't want to do that. You want to take the sponge or whatever cleaning apparatus. Would you use that as a term, apparatus?
Yeah, like we have a netted dishcloth that also
you want to use that
well,
and rub that on the soap bar like you would in the shower and get it nice and sudsy. And then use that to scrub the dishes. And I wonder if that's what you should do. So, anyways,
we'll do a dishwashing tutorial. We've got all kinds of stuff planned for Hazelmeyer Goods.
It sounds like a ploy to get me to wash some dishes. That's what that sounds like. Anyways, shopdh.com, all kinds of great, naturally considered items for you to buy for your house. Get on there, get after it. If you want to follow us on Instagram because you haven't seen us enough or heard us enough, you can do that. I'm at Joey Hazelmeyer. We know that's where you're going to start because the optimal performance food comp is about to drop. Everybody needs to see that. You can follow us at Homegrown Education, Homegrown_education.
Yep.
And then Elizabeth is at Liz Hazelmeyer. And until next time, that's a wrap.